Part 4, Reality is a Shared Hallucination by Howard Bloom. In judging a few fellow human beings, students replace external fact with input they'd been given socially. The cues rerouting herd perception come in many forms. Sociologists Jane Lynn Enke and Donna Eder discovered that in gossip, one person opens with a negative comment on someone outside the group. How the rest of the gang goes on the issue depends entirely on the second opinion expressed. If the second speechifier agrees that the outsider is disgusting, virtually everyone will chime in with a sound-alike opinion. If, on the other hand, the second commentator objects that the outsider is terrific, the group is far less likely to descend like a flock of harpies, tearing the stranger's reputation limb from limb. Crowds of silent voices whisper in our ears, transforming the nature of what we see and hear. Some are those of childhood authorities and heroes. Others come from family and peers. The strangest emerge from beyond the grave. A vast chorus of long-gone ancients constitutes a not-so-silent majority whose legacy has what may be the most dramatic effect on all whose legacy has what may be the most dramatic effect of all on our vision of reality. Take the impact of gender stereotypes. Notions developed over hundreds of generations, contributed to, embellished, and passed on by literally billions of humans during our march through time. In one study, parents were asked to give their impression of their brand new babies. Infant boys and girls are completely indistinguishable aside from the buds of reproductive equipment between their legs. Their size, texture, and the way in which newborns of opposite sex act are, according to researchers J. Z. Rubin and F. J. Provenzano and Z. Luria, completely and totally the same. Everything else. Yet parents consistently described girls as softer, smaller, and less attentive than boys. The crowds within us resculpt our gender verdicts over and over again. Two groups of experimental subjects were asked to grade the same paper. One was told the author was John McKay. The other was told the paper's writer was Joan McKay. Even female students evaluating the paper gave it higher marks if they thought it was from a male. The ultimate repository of herd influence is language, a device which not only condenses the opinions of those with whom we share a common vocabulary, but sums up the perceptual approach of swarms who have passed on. Every word we use carries within it the experience of generation after generation of men, women, families, tribes, and nations, often including their insights, value judgments, ignorance, and spiritual beliefs. Take the simple sentence, feminism has won freedom for women. Indo-European warriors, with whom we shall ride in a later episode, coined the word DH equals A, meaning to suck, as a baby does on the breast. They carried this term from the Asian steppes to Greece, to where it became quisai, to suckle, and the EIE, nipple. The Romans managed to mangle quisal into femina, their word for woman. At every step of the way, millions of humans mouthing the term managed to change its contents. To the Greeks, quasal, or is that quasi, was associated with a segment of the human race on a par with domesticated animals. For that's what women were, even in the splendid days of Plato, whose skeletons in the closet we shall see anon. In Rome, on the other hand, feminae were free, and if they were rich, could have a merry old time behind the scenes, sexually or politically. The declaration that feminism has won freedom for women would have puzzled Indo-Europeans, enraged the Greeks, had been welcomed by the Romans. Hold up. The declaration that feminism has won freedom for women would have puzzled Indo-Europeans. Would have puzzled Indo-Europeans, enraged the Greeks, and been welcomed by the Romans. That's interesting. Yeah, because perspective is everything. And about up here where people pass down their... Well, I'll get that subject at another time. Okay. Freedom, the word for those contents many modern women fight, comes from a men's only ritual among ancient German tribes. Two clans who'd been mowing each other's members down made peace by invoking the god Frida and giving up freedying, so to speak, a few hunches of meat or a pile of animal hides to mollify the enemy and let the matter drop. As for the last word in feminism, has won freedom for women. Hold up. As for the last word in feminism has won freedom for women, woman originally meant nothing more than a man's wife. Anglo-Saxons pronounced it with man. That is terrible. Feminism has won freedom for women. Over the millennia, new generations have mouthed each of these words of ancient tribesmen in new ways, tacking on new connotations, denotations, and associations. The word feminine carried considerable baggage when it wended its way from Victorian times into the 20th century. Quoth Webster's Revised Unabridged Dictionary of 1913. It meant modest, graceful, affectionate, confiding, or weak, nerveless, timid, pleasure-loving, effeminate. Tens of millions of speakers from a host of nations had heaped these messages of weakness on the Indo-European base, and soon a swarm of other talkers would add to the word feminine a very different freight. In 1895, the women's movement changed feminine to feminism, which they define as the theory of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes. It would take millions of women fighting for nearly 100 years to firmly affix the new meaning to syllables formerly associated with the nipple, timidity, and nervelessness. And even now, the crusades rage. With every sentence on feminism we utter, we thread our way through the sensitivities of masses of modern humans who find the feminism a necessity, a necessity, a destroyer of the family, a conversational irritant, or a still open plain on which to battle yet again. This time over whether the word femina will in the future denote the goals of ecofeminists, anarcho-feminists, Amazon feminists, libertarian feminists, all four, or none of the above. The hordes of fellow humans who've left meanings in our words frequently guide the way in which we see our world. Experiments show that people from all cultures can detect subtle differences between colors placed next to each other. But individuals from societies equipped with names for numerous shades can spot the difference when the two swatches of color are apart. At the dawn of the 20th century, the Chukchi people of northeastern Siberia had very few terms for visual hues. If you asked them to sort color yarns, they did a poor job of it. But they had over 24 terms for the patterns of reindeer hide and could classify reindeer far better than the average European scientist, whose vocabulary didn't supply him with such well-honed perceptual tools. Physiologist, ornithologist Jared Diamond in New Guinea saw to his dismay that despite all his university studies of nature, illiterate local tribesmen were far better at distinguishing bird species than was he. Diamond used a set of scientific criteria taught in the zoology classes back home. The New Guinean natives possessed something better: names for each animal variety, names whose local definitions pinpointed characteristics Diamond had never been taught to differentiate. Everything from a bird's peculiarities of deportment to its taste when grilled over a flame. Diamond had binoculars and state-of-the-art taxonomy, but the New Guineans laughed at his incompetence. They were equipped with a vocabulary, each word of which compacted the experience of armies of bird-hunting ancestors. Hey. Priceless. All too often, we see someone perform an action without a name. We rapidly forget its alien outlines and tailor our recall to fit the patterns dictated by convention. That's called conversion. And conventional vocabulary. A perfect example comes from 19th century America, where sibling rivalry was present, in fact, but according to theory didn't exist. Where sibling rivalry was present, in fact, but according to theory didn't exist. The experts were blind to its presence, as shown by its utter absence from family manuals. In the expert and popular view, all that existed between brothers and sisters was love. But letters from middle-class girls expose unacknowledged cattiness and jealousy. Sibling rivalry didn't begin to creep from the darkness of perceptual invisibility until 1893, when future Columbia University professor of political and social ethics Felix Adler hinted at the nameless notion in his manual Moral Instruction for Children during the 1920s. The concept of jealousy between siblings finally shouldered its way robustly into the repertoire of conscious concepts, appearing in two widely quoted government publications, and becoming the focus of a 1926 crusade mounted by the Child Study Association of America. Only at this point the experts finally coined the term sibling rivalry. Now that it carried the compacted crowd power of a label, the formerly non-existent demon was blamed. The formerly non-existent demon was blamed for adult misery, failing marriages, crime, homosexuality, and God knows what else. By the 1940s, Nearly every child-raising guide had extensive sections on this non-entity. Parents writing to major magazines cited the previously unseeable sibling rivalry as the root of almost every one of child raising's many quandaries. The stored experience language carries can make the difference between life and death. For roughly 4,000 years, Tasmanian mothers, fathers, and children starved to death each time famine struck. Despite the fact that their island home was surrounded by fish-rich seas. The problem, their tribal culture did not define fish as food. We could easily suffer the same fate if stranded in their wilderness, simply because the crowd of ancients crimped into our vocabulary tells us that a rich source of nutrients is inedible too. Insects. Oh, let me read that again. We could easily suffer the same fate if stranded in their wilderness, simply because the crowd of ancients crimped into our vocabulary tells us that a rich source of nutrients is inedible too, which is insects. Okay. The perceptual influence of the mob of those who have gone before us and those who stand around us now can be mind-boggling. During the Middle Ages, when universities first arose, a local barber surgeon was called to the lecture chamber of famous medical schools like those of Padua and Salerno, year after year, to dissect a corpse for medical students gathered from the width and the breadth of Europe. A scholar on a raised platform discoursed about the revelations unfolding before the students' eyes. The learned doctor would invariably report a shape for the liver radically different from the form of the organ sliding around on the surgeon's blood-stained hands. He verbally portrayed jaw joints which had no relation to those being displayed on the trestle below him. He described a network of cranial blood vessels that were nowhere to be seen, but he never changed his narrative to fit the actualities. Nor did the students or the surgeon ever stop to correct the book's steeped authority. Why? The scholar was reciting the facts as found in volumes over 1,000 years old, the works of the Roman master Galen, founder of modern medicine. Alas, Galen had drawn his conclusions not from dissecting humans, but from probing the bodies of pigs and monkeys. Pigs and monkeys do have the strange features Glenn described. Humans, however, do not. But that didn't stop the medieval professor from seeing what wasn't there. Their sensory pathways echoed with voices gathered for a millennium. The murmurings of a crowd composed of both the living and the dead. For the perceptual powers of middle-aged scholars were no more individualistic than are yours and mine. Through our sentences and paragraphs, long-gone ghosts still have their say within the collective mind.